Hello friends, Patrick McFarlane here of the Liberty Weekly Podcast, coming at you with the first of what I envision to be a series of 8 to 10 minute videos, short videos, just documenting stories of police abuse in the media. And I wanted to start a little series on this because as a reaction to the Free Thought pages like the Free Thought Project, Police the Police, and Cop Block being banned on YouTube, or Facebook rather, you can see that Free Thought Project often came out with stories of police and state abuse. They had 6 million fans on their Facebook page, and one day Facebook decided to unpublish it, and then Twitter also unpublished the Free Thought Project. Police the Police is a similar organization, social media presence that was also banned from Facebook and Twitter. Cop Block as well. And as an attorney, I think that it is partly my responsibility to help spread news of these sometimes very horrific incidents happening to people all across the country, and to highlight the damage that the war on drugs particularly is causing to this nation and in eroding our freedoms, our civil liberties, costing us lots and lots of money, destroying families, sending lots of adults, parents, sons, brothers, daughters to prison, going to prison for a lot of their adult lives, getting caught up in this drug culture. I've been seeing it a lot firsthand with my own eyes in my law practice that I've just gotten into in the last few months. And it really is sickening just to see the weight of these small flyover communities, the weight that they're bearing, taxing, not only the offenders and people in the community, but also taxing the state itself. A lot of people, the state itself has chosen to monopolize and to prohibit these things, but you can see good people that think they're doing good things in the state, but also struggling to keep up with the economic effects of what is the failed policy of prohibition. And I'll call it prohibition, alluding to alcohol prohibition in the 1920s. It just blows my mind that people that are caught up in the drudgery of this system and the unwinnable war on drugs, how they don't make the connection between the failed policy of alcohol prohibition and what's currently going on in our system. So we're going to start off today with our first story from Radley Balko. And Radley Balko is an opinion writer for the Washington Post. Good old Democracy Dies in Darkness, which I think is ridiculous. However, he's done a lot of great work on the problem of the war on drugs. And in fact, I've cited him extensively in my first ebook, which you can get by signing up for my email list at libertyweekly.net/email. You can see it here. Just say no to drug prohibition, or just say no to drug prohibition. And I studied and captured a lot of his work that he's done. So you can get that and read how prohibition, the policy of prohibition itself, causes these inverse reactions in the market, and a lot of what we know to be the bad effects from drug policy. Everyone will say how society and fabric of society would fall apart if we legalize drugs. Well, inversely, it's making drugs illegal that are causing the effects that we attribute to drugs themselves. So here, Radley Balko documents Little Rock Police Department's dangerous and illegal drug war. And then, so first, this man, Roderick Talley, he says, "You don't know what fear is until you wake up and your own front door is flying at you." And this is one thing that Radley Balko documents a lot in the work that he's done, that I document as well in my ebook that you can get. Just how in the 1960s, SWAT teams weren't really a thing. In the 70s, I believe it was the 70s, SWAT teams are introduced first in LA, and you can see them gradually ramping up. In the beginning, you would only have a few SWAT raids every year nationally. And then now, I think it was last year, there were 80,000 SWAT raids across the United States. And with that sheer number of SWAT raids, you get police officers setting people up or raiding the wrong house, blowing through doors, having military-style raids just to serve search warrants. And it's ridiculous. It causes property damage. A lot of time, since the state, I believe there is a conflict of interest when the state litigates cases that it is a party to itself. The state declares that it has qualified immunity, and this is something that I've talked about a lot on my show. So there's no civil liability for serving of these search warrants that you see. But basically, this story documents how Roderick Talley was served with the search warrant based on faulty pretenses. They didn't find any drugs in his apartment. Well, I can just read it. So they blasted this door open while he was sleeping. 11 heavily armed men filed in with military-style weapons and full body armor, riot gear, what have you. He didn't really know what to do. He threw up his hands. He didn't want to get shot. He's 31 years old. He's a barber living in Little Rock, not involved with drugs. He had a security camera in his apartment, and basically the police came in. They rifled through his belongings, didn't find any drugs, and then saw that there was a security camera that had recorded the whole thing. And while they have Roderick Talley handcuffed in a chair, they go through, and you can see it here. They joke about how they blew his door down right in front of him, and they watch the footage of it happening.
Camera's not available.
Oh, he unplugged.
Because it's unplugged.
Yeah.
But this one should have shown the door blown up.
Oh, it might, video clip.
And then they just laugh at him while they've rifled through all of his belongings.
Hey, good. I'm like, what the fuck? Ah, man.
I ain't gonna lie, that's awesome. I'm gonna record that real quick.
Can you play it back again? I want to see it myself.
I mean, who's the thugs in this situation? They found a few digital scales, plastic bags that he used to pack his lunch. And in fact, you could scoff at this. A lot of maybe conservative types would scoff at this and say, well, of course he's a drug dealer. They found digital scales. They didn't find any drugs, but they found digital scales. What's he doing with digital scales? They found plastic bags. Well, it turns out it was all a sting operation on behalf of the Little Rock Police Department, and Talley has the video to prove it. So the Little Rock Police Department alleged that they had a sting operation where an informant went up to Talley's door and allegedly bought $100 worth of coke from Talley, and that's what they used to base their search off of. Well, it turns out Talley had the security camera, and this informant who they said came up to the door and bought coke from Talley actually had not. He knocked on the door and then left. So, and this is a situation where you'll get blanket excuses from police departments that they need to do these SWAT searches and come in all guns blazing because, of course, blanket statement, everyone who is a drug dealer is involved with weapons, has dangerous weapons, or they have dogs, or what have you. Well, there's really alarming statistics on the amount that police departments get the search warrants wrong. They go to the wrong house. Here, let's see, Radley Balko documents this. And he's uncovered that this is happening especially badly in Little Rock. So he talked to 9 other people who had been raided by LRPD's narcotics unit over the past 2 years. He's reviewed more than 100 search warrants executed by the unit since 2016. According to policing and Fourth Amendment experts, these interviews and warrants show that the LRPD, narcotics cops, and SWAT teams are routinely violating the Fourth Amendment rights of Little Rock residents. They're also putting people at unnecessary risk. And there's strong evidence that in some cases officers have made demonstrably false statements under oath. And that's alarming. 3 main areas of concern. First, the narcotics unit appears to be routinely violating Fourth Amendment by serving nearly all of its warrants with no-knock raids. It's asking for no-knock warrants without demonstrating why each suspect merits a no-knock entry as required by federal law. Worse yet, Little Rock judges are then signing off on these warrants. Secondly, the LRPD is serving many of these warrants by using explosives that SWAT veterans I've interviewed say are reckless, dangerous, and wholly inappropriate for use in drug raids. I've also spoken to at least 2 people who will say there were children in the home when the explosives were used. Finally, and perhaps most troubling, there's clear evidence that one informant whom LRPD drug cops have been using, the informant used to obtain probable cause against Talley and others, have been lying to police about his drug buys. At minimum, the detectives who worked with him have been inexcusably sloppy in their handling of him. And there's also evidence that raises questions about their own truthfulness. So I know the standard excuse you'll get is that, oh, these drug dealers are all bad guys. They're bad types. They train police dogs to be they train dogs to be vicious. They have guns. Well, in the same way that Prohibition in the 1920s and early 30s, you had dangerous criminal elements that formed around alcohol. Al Capone, Bugsy Malone, all those guys. You had some bank robbers in there as well, but these bootleggers became armed. They were criminals by necessity, by definition, because the state had chosen to make them criminals. Otherwise, you know, people would just go to normal businesses. They would know exactly how much they were buying when it comes to drugs or alcohol. They would know that it was pure. Furthermore, they would have legitimate recourse against people whom they bought poor products from. You know, people are going to do drugs whether you want them to or not, whether it's illegal or not. They're going to do drugs. They're not going to obey the law. The same conservatives that would say, well, gun control doesn't work because criminals don't obey laws. Well, drug addicts are going to get their fix whether it's illegal or not. So you have to... Would you rather have them buying drugs from Walgreens or a corner store, or would you rather have dangerous criminal cartels form and distribute those drugs for themselves? And I'll leave you with that. I'll include a link in the show notes of this YouTube video, and I'd look out for other videos on police abuse that I will be doing in the future here. But you can follow me at libertyweekly.net with the Liberty Weekly podcast you can see on the screen here. Also, my work appears at the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org. You can find my podcast in the podcast section. I did a short show, a longer, more in-depth scholarly episode on the roots of the Germanic folklore. So, double threat guy. I do modern stuff, also legal history. And try and follow these pages: Free Thought Project, Police the Police, and Cop Block USA. But for now, I really appreciate you watching, and don't talk to the police.